One senator is calling for President Trump to fire Chief of Staff John Kelly over his handling of the Rob Porter abuse allegations. Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin says Kelly should be held accountable after he learned of Porter's alleged behavior and allowed him to keep his job.
Baldwin says firing Kelly would send a message and push back against the notion the White House is ignoring the voices of women. And Senator Tammy Baldwin is on Capitol Hill with more on her call for the president to fire the Chief of Staff, General John Kelly. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So the White House is standing by General Kelly, saying it has confidence in the Chief of Staff. What's your take on the latest fallout surrounding the Rob Porter case?
You know, there's so many things that disturb me about the Rob Porter case. And first of all, the timeline that the FBI presented yesterday at an open hearing of the Senate Intelligence Committee doesn't align with what the White House has been telling the American public. That is disturbing. Secondly, it seems that they have had information for a long, long time about the domestic abuse situation with Rob Porter in his past and chose to do nothing. Thirdly, there are reportedly dozens, perhaps, of White House officials who lack security clearance, who nevertheless are getting access to classified information, as we heard in the Rob Porter case. So I believe that on all of those levels, the buck stops with the president, and he ought to terminate the person most in charge of getting this right.
And Senator, there was a position created during the Obama administration that has gone unfilled over the last year. The White House advisor on violence against women. The Trump administration also has not named anyone to head the Department of Justice's Office of Violence Against Women, or even the State Department's Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issues. What's your suggestion, your recommendation to the President of the United States to fill these positions and also to speak out personally against what is happening to women across this country?
Well, the president's own record puts all of these things into question. And if he wanted to confront them, he could. He could make public statements about domestic abuse. He could hear and respect the voices of women. And he certainly should prioritize filling vital positions that are focused on the safety of women, certainly not having named over a year into his term key positions like Director of the Office of Violence Against Women, as well as other key positions, is unacceptable.
Senator, I want to talk to you a little bit about immigration. Your fellow senators have begun an open-ended debate on immigration. You know what the president wants to see. He wants funding for his border wall and security. He wants something done with DACA. He wants to scale back the family-based immigration, and he wants to scrap the lottery system. What is it? And also reduce legal immigration overall. It's a lot of stuff there. What's it going to take to get fellow Democrats, your fellow Democrats, on board with bipartisan legislation that you think the president would back?
You know, first of all, this is a crisis of the president's own creation. He rescinded the DACA program, and it left the futures of hundreds of thousands of dreamers in question. These are people who have been vetted, who have known no other country than America. They pledge allegiance to our flag, and we need to correct that situation. Now, when the president rescinded DACA, he simply said, I'm tossing this over to Congress to address. And that has to be first and foremost in our mind. Now, he's thrown a lot of other things into the mix, but in the meantime, an earnest bipartisan group of House members as well as senators have been trying to find common ground so that we can first and foremost address this crisis of the president's own creation. I am hopeful as negotiations continue in the Senate this week. The Senate, of course, is tackling this issue first, that we will find common ground, something that the House will also take up and pass, and I think the president will accept it.
Where do you think that common ground might be found?
Well, I think that addressing the dreamer situation with a path towards citizenship. As I said, these young people have known no other country than America. They work hard, they've been vetted, they serve in our military, they attend school and are contributing to the American economy. And I certainly think that we want to discuss some level of border security, and I think that we can do that and send a strong package, first of all, to the House of Representatives. We have to get their buy-in also, and then to the president.
Senator Baldwin, the Republicans say they're willing to work with Democrats on protecting Dreamers. They just, what they say, simply want funding for the president's border walls and limits to family-based migration in exchange for those protections. So is it a small price to pay to give the president the wall that he's been talking about for the last couple of years in exchange for protecting these nearly 700,000 Dreamers?
Well, I don't know that I would describe the Republicans as speaking with one voice as you described. There are many Republicans in the Senate who depart with some of the demands of the president. What we have to do in the Senate first is get 60 votes on a compromise measure that I think weighs all of those factors. And I think we're making earnest progress. There are a number of bills that have been introduced or worked on that are bipartisan, led by Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham, led by Chris Coons and John McCain. I think these are starting points because they show there is buy-in by members of both sides of the aisle.
So, Senator, this is supposed to be Infrastructure Week. I don't think we've talked very much about infrastructure, or maybe at the beginning of the week, and that was about it. But the president did unveil his plan for a nationwide infrastructure overhaul, and it requires a significant amount of support and funding from state and local governments. Is Wisconsin willing to go along with the president's plan?
Well, I'm glad you brought up infrastructure because this is a high priority in my state. We have over 115,000 miles of roads in need of repair. We have 1,200 bridges that are structurally inadequate. We have 700,000 Wisconsinites who do not have access to high-speed broadband, and a lot of communities with lead lateral drinking water pipes that threaten their water supply with unsafe levels of lead. That said, I was listening carefully to the president when he spoke at the State of the Union about his upcoming infrastructure package, and then looked at the dual introduction on Monday of his infrastructure package and his 2019 budget. There are a few major shortcomings that I want to point out while saying that infrastructure investment has strong bipartisan support if we get it right. But the shortcomings, first of all, he's claiming that $200 billion over 10 years will leverage $1.3 trillion from local and private investment to get up to that desired $1.5 trillion level. Towns, villages, cities, and the state of Wisconsin do not have 80% match for those federal dollars. They have been struggling in Wisconsin with their own transportation budget. It actually held our state budget up for several months, the issue of transportation and infrastructure. And so I think that that's pie in the sky, frankly, if you understand the fiscal condition of our states and localities. Secondly, in the president's 2019 budget proposal, it's hard to believe, but calls for cuts in infrastructure spending that equal the amount that he's calling for in his infrastructure package. That's ridiculous. But I think another issue that's so important to my state of Wisconsin is the idea of Buy America, Hire America. That's what the president ran on. And he has been all talk and no action on this. I was waiting for those words in the State of the Union address. In fact, my guest for the State of the Union address was Avery Smith, an operating engineer who operates a lattice crane on construction sites. We were both waiting to hear the president say, Buy America, Hire America. He wants to be building roads and bridges with American products, American iron, American steel. And we have seen nothing of the sort in the president's infrastructure plan. In fact, it appears that he's trying to waive those traditional requirements. And this will be a huge hit to Wisconsin manufacturers as well as Wisconsin workers.
Senator Baldwin, something else that's sort of specific that most Americans can understand. As you know, there have been several accidents in the last couple of weeks, in the last month, in December, with Amtrak rail service. The president, during a speech in the wake of that train crash, where Republican senators and members of Congress were traveling on, the president said, all the more reason why we must start immediately fixing the infrastructure of the United States. He even tweeted about it. When the budget for the infrastructure plan came out, we discovered that the president is cutting the Amtrak budget in half. What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's very much what I was describing earlier, that he takes away with one hand and offers with the other. You can't, it was hard to fathom on the same day seeing his budget and his infrastructure plan, one cutting over $200 billion in infrastructure across the board, and the other proposing to spend that much to leverage $1.3 trillion in additional local, state, and private spending in this arena. All of these things should raise questions about whether these are just words or whether it is a serious plan. I want a serious plan to move forward. I want to make sure that we are building our infrastructure with American-made steel, iron, products, and workers. And that'll be my fight. But I know there's strong bipartisan support for a major infrastructure investment. We have a lot of things to repair, and I want to get at it. But this blueprint from the president is extremely disappointing.
So do you think, like many critics have said, that the president's plan is dead on arrival?
Well, I certainly think that there may be elements that we look at. But, you know, I haven't even begun to speak about the private investment that the president is hoping for in this. Wall Street firms are accepting investments from foreign countries. We're concerned about Trump tolls, but I'm concerned as much about Trump tolls that will really be being paid to Saudi Arabia, that has just invested in Wall Street firms in order to invest in infrastructure. This is pretty frightening if we are going to have tolls being paid to foreign countries. So there has to be a lot more examination of this troubling proposal.
Senator Tammy Baldwin on Capitol Hill, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.